Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it. How you doing, John?
Good afternoon. Yeah, not too bad. How's things?
Hi, John.
Hiya, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's a fine beard you've got there.
Thank you very much. I mean, people always say that, and you don't have to do very much other than just wait, really. So it's
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, let's jump into it, shall we?
lovely.
Yeah, for the benefit of the tape, we're joined
By, and I might butcher your surname, I'm very sorry, Tom McCooey?
Yeah, spot on. First time.
Wonderful.
It's written as it said, so it's harder to spell than it is to say. So if that was an American number plate, like state logo, that's what my family motto would be.
And I'm trying to think how we got in touch with each other. I can't remember whether I found you or you found us, but the premise is you've written a book, which is out at the moment,
Yeah.
which obviously we'll kind of come on to, but you've written a book pretty much on the subject of our podcast, My Dad's Car.
That's the one.
And so, yeah, here we are a few weeks or so later.
Seemed like a good fit because my dad's car and a book about literally my dad's car. So here we are.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a quick...
Yeah, I can do by all means. So basically, my dad's car is, or was, because it is now mine, 1956 MG Magnette ZA, which to those who know and love them, and to those who don't or are not really aware of them, it's not the world's most desirable or the world's most stunning classic car, but to those who have them, it means an awful lot, and it definitely means an awful lot to me. The reason is, so when we were kids, it was in my parents' garage, completely unmoved, apart from us clambering in it and holding the steering wheel and pretending to drive it and this, that, and the other, but it never turned a wheel. And the reason my mum and dad kept it was because it was their wedding car, so it held huge sentimental value to them.
Okay.
And some minor thing went wrong with it, like one of the semaphore indicators stopped working or something like that. And because me and my brother were little, it was just, I'll get to that job when I get to it, but I'm sort of trying to keep small humans alive right now at the minute. It just got put off and put off and put off to the point where a tiny job became a colossal job.
Yeah.
And me and my dad sort of tinkered with it a little bit when I was a kid, but stuff sort of gets in the way, as it does when you're a kid. First, it was weekends were spent where he was taking me to sporting stuff and he was taking my sister and my brother to drama classes or swimming or whatever it was, so the car was ignored. Then we started mulling around with it when I was about 14, and then when you're 15, you pick up a guitar, and then cars just sort of go out the window again. And that was that, basically, until I thought, you know what, I really want to get stuck into this now and help. And there was a lot to do by that point, but then the sort of throw a huge spanner in the works. My dad died, and it's like, oh, sort of missed my chance there. And my mum said, well, you can have the car if you want it. And here we are. 6 years later, it's finally back on the road. Well, it was 6 years in 2020, so we're getting on for 10 years now, actually. So I've had it back on the road probably 4 and a bit years now.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good. So the book came about because of being a journalist and a writer by trade.
Okay.
And the writing was sort of more processing my grief in a way, really.
I was going to say, was it therapeutic?
Yeah.
Because I've lost my father 7 years ago, something like that. And
Yeah.
we've only been doing this kind of getting on for 2 years, but in a way it is nice to sort of share those memories. And John's kind of probably a little bit longer for you, isn't it, John? But I guess, yeah, being able to talk about them in a happy way without kind of pining, so to speak. You're just enjoying those happy memories, those little kind of quirks and things that, yeah, they might have just said off the cuff, which you took no notice of at the time, but
Yeah.
it all kind of makes sense when you start sort of laying it out and chatting about it a bit later.
Yeah, it's 100% that. I think I'm really, really bad at grief. My whole family probably very similar. We absolutely suck at it, to the point where I think I went to work about 4 days later after my dad died.
Oh, wow.
Because it was like, right, okay, if I'm busy, I'm not thinking about it. It's sad, really, but I think that's quite a typical male response to sort of something huge happening like that, is you shut it out.
Get back to normal.
Yeah, back to normal, crack on sort of thing. But then you realise 10 years later you didn't grieve. And that's really not healthy. And you start to see other things in your life where you think, if I'd have just taken a moment, I'd have handled that differently.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who helps me out on the car a lot, who same age as my dad, who's a photographer on the paper and works to be on the car now quite a lot. He comes around and we have like a 2 brew job type thing where if something's wrong with the car, like it'll take 2 brews to fix that and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
His advice was always respond, don't react. I'm still really bad at it, but I like to try and carry that with me a little bit, because if I'd have done more responding and less reacting at the time, I'd have probably had a sort of a healthier process, maybe, speaking about it. So that's where the writing came in. I thought I'll just write for me and put down on paper or on a screen the stuff so I don't forget it, because everyone probably feels like this about the dad, but you want to preserve as much as you possibly can. And then after a bit, I thought, oh God, I've got a book here. There's like 80,000 words of dad. And I knew the publisher anyway, because they're quite well known for doing rugby league stuff, and I'm a rugby league journalist.
Have you written other books before? Is this the first time you kind of done a book as such?
This is book number 3. So first book was about Wigan Warriors Rugby League Club, totally separate, nothing to do with cars whatsoever.
Okay.
Second book was with 2 other journalists, and that was Wigan Warriors' 150th anniversary. So again, nothing to do with cars. And this was totally separate. But I had a chat with the publisher and I said, do you mind having a read of this? And you just tell me honestly, I'm not precious, I'm not after anything, but can you tell me if it's any good? And he read it, went, yeah, I'd like to publish it. So, whoa, okay.
Nice.
Okay, let's go for it. So obviously then I had to then get in touch with everybody mentioned in it, because it's quite personal, really. It's not just about the car. You've got to have the stories that go with it, which means this point in childhood, this point in life. And,
these people.
You know, there's things like the birth of my children in there, which means then you have to then go and speak to my wife and say, look, there's stuff about you in here as well. Do you mind? And like checking that out, and then going to my mum and saying, I spoke to you about the car and put this in this writing, but now it was going to be published. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And it turned out that everyone was okay with it. There's a few minor edits that I went through and thought, oh, yeah, maybe people might not be interested in that, or maybe I'll just change the wording here so this person's not embarrassed by something. And then, in October, we had a book, which I'm very, very proud of, but more because it's just something else of my dad in a neat little package. It's not scattered around the house in 1,000 bits like a wallet or a wedding ring there or whatever. It's just like a package of dad, and I'm really proud of that.
Fantastic.
Cool. So what's the book called and where can people buy it? And then we'll ask you the big question.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So the book is called Maggie, A Lifelong MG Love Affair, because we're very imaginative naming our cars. I'm sure a lot of people are as well. So Maggie is quite a common shortening of Magnette. And you can basically Google that and find Scratching Shed publications. You can buy it direct from the publisher there. There's other places that do stock it as well, but you can get it straight from the publisher by Googling Scratching Shed publications and then looking for me.
Fantastic.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's going to be lots to talk about.
Yeah.
What's your earliest car memory? And it doesn't have to be this vehicle. Like, we'll skirt around that, I'm sure, but it could be. But
there's a few car memories that are sort of like blurry and not in high definition. If we're going to go the first HD, I know this definitely happened, car memory. We had, the best way to describe it is maroon, but it was more like purple than maroon. Montego, a Rover Montego 7-seater with the way back seats in the boot. It was basically like open up the hatchback and you could pull out a bench.
Yeah.
And there were 5 of us. So my sister and my brother sat in the normal back seats, and I could have quite happily gone in there as well. I was like, I'm having that. That's my domain. I remember this. We always used to run cars into the ground as well. I think that was quite common in like the late 80s and early 90s with people raising kids and money and things like that. You didn't get a new car every year. You ran what you had into the ground. And I just remember going everywhere backwards. Had a little tray that you could put sweets in and forget about them, get like welded to the plastic. Writing notes and holding them up to people who were driving behind you. Sometimes I'd fall asleep. So then you'd like sit up and then you'd see the person behind you driving and go, oh, Jesus Christ, like this kid just up in the boot. Let's go. So stuff like that was good fun. That's earliest car memory. Yeah, definitely. And sharing the boot with shopping and things like that. So you'd be like, can I delve into these biscuits? Will anyone hear me? And that kind of thing. So
I think I've labelled those style seats the vomit seats on a previous episode. Yeah. Travelling backwards can be a bit sort of turbulent for some, can't it? I know it is for me, actually. And we used to go in sort of taxis where you get the short straw of...
Yeah, although my son now, he's 4, he insists in going on those. If ever we get in a cab anywhere, he wants to do the backwards thing.
All right.
So was there a necessity for a 7-seater in your family? Like, have you got loads of siblings or...?
No, it wasn't a necessity initially. There was only 5 of us. So I think it was just the fact that it was like a practical car. My mum and dad, they wanted the hack that would do everything from Christmas trees to taking animals to the vets. So it just made sense to have something like a Montego.
Yeah.
But then my little brother was born when I was 14.
Okay.
And then there was 6 of us. So then there was a necessity for a 7-seater. And that was just about the time I started to get interested in being in bands and stuff like that as well. So the very glamorous Vauxhall Zafira then became a bass cab / people hauler abouter type thing. And again, I was in the back, way back in that as well. I definitely promise you I got on with my family. There was no sort of ill feeling, but I just liked my distance when we were travelling, like some sort of royal in the back of the vehicle.
And were you listening to music in there?
Yeah, always. I was the kid with the tape. I used to make compilation tapes, like mixtapes, quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd be the one doing that with batteries, like rubbing them together, like, come on, please, just work. And then we upgraded to mini disc players one Christmas. I think it was Christmas 1999 to going into 2000. Me and my brother got mini discs. Oh my God, that was like the height of technology. I remember thinking, gosh, I'm going to have to put all these tape compilations down to these mini discs. And that lasted about 2 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, they had like a little window, didn't they, where they were sort of massive, and then that was it.
That was it, yeah. And then I remember seeing an iPod for the first time, probably just doing my GCSEs and being insanely jealous of this person. Do you remember the white ones with the wheel on the...
Yeah.
It's still a black and white. It's like, there's literally thousands of stuff on this. It's amazing. So that was the first time I ever got credit. And it was a really, really bad idea because things have just snowballed since then, especially having kids. But you go, right, buy now, pay later. Yeah, I'm up for that. I went and got myself this iPod. I still got it sellotape together. And I was always the one in the back of the car with headphones plugged in. Always had music on the go.
I thought you were going to say you're still paying it off, Tom.
If you do the maths, I probably am. I've probably still got like 20 quid to go on it. Something like that.
So you had your music on. Were your folks listening to kind of the radio in the front with your brothers and sisters, or? Yeah,
it was back in the day when local radio was still going. So that was always on just because my dad was like, you listen to music in the car, I can't concentrate on driving. It's like one thing, it's like my dad, big music person. So what you'd expect with like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Dire Straits, all that kind of stuff. But if you put music my dad liked on in the car, I was like, I can't. It's like, I've got to that age where you turn down the radio to see when you're driving, even though obviously they're not related.
Or to park.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So we always just had local radio on just because I'm driving, I'm not listening to music, that kind of thing.
Turn it down so you can hear when you're tapping the car behind when you're reverse parking. Yeah.
100% that, yeah.
I took my glasses off to read a menu in the pub yesterday. I was like, oh, man. They offered me varifocals and I got my glasses changed. I was like, no, I definitely don't need varifocals. I'm not kind of Dame Edna or whatever. Or who's the snooker player? Steve Davis.
Dennis Taylor.
That's the Badger.
Yeah.
And then there's me with my glasses in one hand. And I was just like, am I 70?
Brilliant. Yeah. And I remember as well, my dad was taking me to a rugby game on a Sunday, he'd let me have my tape on to sort of psych me up, so to speak. So my little compilation tape. So it was a BMW at the time, very posh. And you remember those car radios that you pulled out, but they weighed like an absolute ton. So nobody ever pulled them out. So what was the point? Or they were under the passenger seat of the car anyway.
Yeah.
But because you're taking it out and in so many times, you'd have to like really, there was a knack of putting it in just the right way because the connections were wearing out. And that was car music.
It always makes me laugh, those little removable fascias we all used to take off.
Oh, it's brilliant.
But we did used to put them under the seat, didn't we?
Yeah, because we wouldn't take them in the shop or anything. So if you want a car radio, just smash through and look under the seat.
Exactly, yeah.
Prime advice for you there.
Okay, so yeah, they had the Rover. You mentioned the Zafira.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful. And you've just hinted at a BMW. Do you know much more about the BMW?
Yeah, so it's going to make us sound really posh because we had two at one point. It's quite embarrassing. I promise you, they were clapped out when we bought them. So basically when the Montego died, for whatever reason, my mum and dad decided that a big sort of estate car wasn't needed anymore. We got the second-hand BMW 5 Series that was red.
Okay. And
it was one of those where, the colour goes, it gets sun bleached. So the sides of the car were red, but the boot and the bonnet were white. I had to be out with T-cut and it was like, it's not white anymore, but it's pink. It's still not red. And you could just probably get it re-lacquered or something like that, but we never did that. And then my dad decided he really liked my mum's BMW, so he was going to get himself on for work. He was driving around in a Ford Fiesta at the time, called the Silver Bullet, but it's more like the Silver Death Trap. It was one of those, it didn't have seatbelts in the back. So we were all just like bouncing around in the back on the way to school, having a great time, while he was driving in the front.
What was that, Mk2 Fiesta maybe? Mark 1, Mk2 Fiesta?
Yeah, 88, 89, something like that.
Yeah.
And then he swapped that for a BMW 318i, which we ended up killing both BMWs. And that was when the Zafira came, and it was about that time that little brother came along.
Okay.
So they went for the Zafira, and then my dad's work car then was the most embarrassing car in the world ever because it was the car we learned to drive in. So we bought a Vauxhall Agila for me and my brother to learn in. And he may as well have just said, I'm not buying your deodorant anymore. because that was the social effect it had.
Is that the one with the rear doors that open like a Rolls Royce?
No, they didn't open like a Rolls Royce.
It's a bit like a Suzuki wagon, isn't it? Like a little square on wheels.
It's the same car with a different badge. I swear, the same car down to the last detail except the badge. And the wheels were like the size of a birthday card badge, but on a normal car. And you'd just be driving around thinking, I really am hating life right now. Learning to drive should be a liberating experience. It should be exciting. But I just remember the gear lever was about 6 feet long sticking out the floor. You could never find which gear you wanted to go in, because even though as a learner you can't anyway, but it was even harder because of that.
Yeah.
You felt like you were going to tip over on corners, and then when you did pull up and anybody recognised you, you'd be like, oh Christ, pull your hood up and like put your hat on, all that kind of stuff. Didn't want to be seen in it, but here we are.
So that was a company car, Tom?
It wasn't a company car, no, we bought it to go to work.
Oh, you bought it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you know where your parents were sourcing these cars in the past?
Yeah, the Vauxhalls came from Lookers in St Helens, which we still go to, because it's one of those where they're really good. And for family cars, you go in and then I don't know if this is like the new sales tactic, but they've always been like this, is have what they call a walk away policy. So you look at the car and they go, right, go on, go walk away. We're not going to put pressure on you. And it sort of works in a weird way, because you go, oh, they were really nice, go back. So we've got a Vauxhall now as our carrying the kids around car, because it does a job. It's not expensive. It's not particularly flashy. Doesn't qualify as a Chelsea tractor, so you're okay on that front as well. But it's got all the bits you'd expect from a modern car, is in ISOFIX, so the kids are safe and it's not going to overheat or break down on you, you'd hope. So does the job. So until we're such a time where we can get something a bit flashier, it's fine.
Does the job.
Does the job.
Absolutely. So yeah, you alluded to the fact your parents didn't physically get married in the car, but they had the MG as their wedding car.
Yeah. Was their wedding car.
Did they get married before you guys came along?
Yeah, so that was 1983 they got married, and then the car went off the road really soon after that. My brother was born in 1985.
And were they still using it when you guys came along? Or?
I know it was running at some point then, because there's a picture of my brother, he must have been about 2, washing it.
Oh, okay.
It might not have been road legal, but it had been pulled out of the garage onto the drive or whatever, and a bit of a toy to like sort of fettle with. I was born in 87 and it hadn't moved. The first time I ever saw it actually out of the garage was my mum was having a garage door, a new one, probably about 2016. So this is 2 years after I inherited it. And I had to push it out the garage to let the people come in and do the door. And the reason I hadn't pushed it out before then was because my mum's drive is like a 45-degree angle. It's like really steep. So once you pushed old MG out, it's like...
You got to get it back again.
How do I get it back in? So there's a story about that conundrum in the book, where I'm sat on the road, sitting on the asphalt in front of the car going, how am I going to get that back in there with no power? And you can find out what happened in the book.
The opposite of a cliffhanger there.
A taser, yeah.
A cliff upper.
Cliff upper, yeah, definitely. So, that was good fun.
So it was your father's car rather than your mother's car.
Yeah.
And before they got married, was that considered kind of a toy car for him, or was that his regular runaround?
No, that was his car. He went to work in it. He was a teacher, and the headmaster would say, like, oh, who's come to work in a police car? That kind of thing.
Something from Heartbeat.
Yeah, because even then, like late 70s, early 80s, it was probably only about 25 years old then at that point, the car. But it was still seen as some sort of like archaic relic back then. And
it's quite a 50s design, isn't it? Sort of.
You look at it and you know straight away there's no other decade it could possibly be from. It's brilliant for that. Absolutely.
And kind of jumping forward to today, how do you feel when you kind of drive that? Does it drive as you imagined it would drive?
It does now.
Do you kind of almost go into your father's head as you driving it, or?
It does now. When I very first drove it home, I was petrified to the point. You remember when you're like a learner driver and you put your foot down on the clutch and your whole leg starts shaking, and then you can't find the bike point and the car lurches forward, and then someone behind you paps because you're being so slow at lights and so careful, and then your gears crunch. Took about 2 or 3 weeks of that before I was like, right, okay, you've got to settle into this car now. It'll be fine. The more you drive it, you want to enjoy it, it'll be fine. So I drove it as much as possible, whether it's to go and get a pint of milk from the shops. I've been the tip in it, all sorts, like just use the car.
Proper dad stuff, tip run.
Yeah, I love going the tip.
Can't beat it, yeah.
We've gone off the tangent now, but I love everything about the tip, from the noise to the smoke, and the fact you're encouraged to throw things in a skip. It's brilliant. Anyway, going back to the Magnette, it was quite jerky anyway. When you were accelerating, it was labouring and it was chugging. And Gary and a mate called Bill Parr, who's one of Gary's mates, so Gary's the photographer at the paper, We just started fettling over a period of probably 18 months. Things like we stripped the carbs and put them back together. I say I had tea and filmed it all and Instagrammed it like I know what I'm doing while they actually did it. A few little jobs here and there, just sorting it out, tuning, performing what I would describe as wizardry. And now the car drives beautifully. And I think it's a mixture of the two, that it's being properly looked after by people who know what they're doing while I watch, and that I'm driving it more often. Because as we all know, classic cars hate not being used.
Yeah.
And I've fallen victim to that a couple of times since I've had the car back, where sort of you get a weekend in December or whatever, think I'm going to go for a drive, and then you think, yeah, but I've also got a 6-month-old baby that I've not seen all week because I've been at work.
Yeah.
A week becomes 3 weeks, becomes a month, becomes 2 months. You sit down, you try and start the car, nothing, that kind of thing. And that happened a couple of times in the early days because I got the car back a week before my eldest was born.
Okay.
And now it's just recognizing, okay, you can do both. You've just got to manage that really carefully. So it helps now that the kids sleep at the same time every evening rather than just being like chaotic. I don't know how to describe it really, because sometimes it can be like a scene from The Walking Dead when you're trying to get kids to sleep, whereas that's more consistent now. So you go, right, okay, so they're going to be asleep at this time. I can at least start the car and drive it down to the local shop and get a pint of milk or whatever and come back in it.
Yeah.
You know, on a Saturday morning, because they're that little bit older, a little bit easier to manage, you go, right, I'll take it out just for a quick run around the block and then I'm back, sort of thing. So it is getting more and more easy to handle, because I'm getting more confident as well. There's the odd days in some way I think, do you know what, I'm going to use it for work today.
Nice.
What was it that clicked in your head that thought, I've got to kind of save this? And what was the first job you did? And it sounds like you're not a mechanic.
No, I'm not a mechanic at all. I like old things, and I've got a knack of collecting things that don't work properly. So like I've got the Bakelite phone from my granddad's house, which is just sitting there on the counter at the minute, which isn't worth anything. I've seen them on eBay for like a tenner, but it's just like, I really want to just send it to someone who can put a modern plug on it and get it to work, that kind of thing. I've got a typewriter that doesn't work. I've still got the mini disc player. So whether it's 50s technology or 90s technology, I just love stuff that doesn't work properly. I'm definitely like a vinyl man. I'm going to get a CD player soon, that kind of thing, get those down out the loft. I don't know what it is. I just like making things difficult.
I've still got CDs in the car. I did go through an iPod stage with like the telephone dial type iPod, but yeah, it stopped working, unfortunately. So I went backwards to CDs, and I just buy them in charity shops now. I
used to have a carrier bag in my old BMW that had like various mixed CDs that I'd made. Like we're talking sort of 10, 15 years ago.
Brilliant.
And it was great when you just sort of slip one. It was a lucky dip. Nothing was labelled. So you just sort of go through the eras as they were. But I haven't got a CD player anymore in my cars. So there are times. I
actually think variety has suffered as a result of that, because you plug your phone into CarPlay or whatever and you drive off and your most recently played stuff came on. And obviously because you've got kids in the back, you've got, you know, we don't talk about Bruno from Encanto comes on, or Moana music or stuff like that. And it's, can I just have some of my music or whatever? And then you just end up putting the same playlist on over and over again and hearing the same 20 songs. And then you think, there was actually more variety when you walk past the CD shelf before you're going to work. You think, right, which 3 CDs am I taking to work today? And do that. So I definitely think sometimes it's easier to choose music. And you've got like 30 albums. It's easier to find music to play and enjoy than going, Alexa, play... head goes blank, most recent thing, and then we're all singing We Don't Talk About Bruno again.
So yeah, you opened your mum's garage, and obviously this car's in there.
I didn't answer the question, sorry. So you're absolutely right, I'm not a mechanic. I can do more than I used to, but I'm still not a mechanic.
Was your dad handy, just to jump in?
Probably, if I'm being honest, no. He talked a good game. And like me, could write well, but if we're being honest, he was probably not the best technically with his cars. Like a good driver, liked old stuff, could do a thing or two, but probably not the person you go to with a serious problem.
Which I guess is why it was in the condition it was in the garage.
Probably because if you could fettle and have a tinker here and there, even when you've got the kids knocking around.
Yeah.
Now, you could do things like the fuel pump was sticking. Could use the appropriate force with like a mallet to get it to work or something like that. But if we're talking stripping carbs, it probably wouldn't do that. But the first job, because it was all seized up, was to get the thing to move. So the first thing I did was try to find a jacking point where it wouldn't go through the floor of the car, which, if I'm being brutally honest, at that point was like a tea bag. So it took about 3 or 4 goes to find something.
It had been kept inside, yeah?
Yeah. It was still crusty as. And I think the side door of the garage I'm going to blame, because I think that let just enough in over the 30 odd years it was there to just cause a few issues. When I say a few issues, oh my God, if it wasn't my dad's car, I would have walked away.
Yeah.
It was that bad. But the first job was to take the wheels off and just basically unstick the brakes.
Yeah.
And I knew the engine was seized. And I thought the wires were all like melted. I thought this has got too hot at some point. So if I put a battery on this and press the button, that could be an issue. So we're not going to do that. So it was trying to unstick the engine. And me being me goes, okay, I'll do some research, look on YouTube or Google or whatever. Pour a little bit of diesel in the spark plug and leave it for a week. That'll do it.
Okay.
So to me, a little bit of diesel was probably about a good litre more than I should have put in. We're not talking a thimble. I put a load of diesel in. That didn't work. So I put the starting handle on, because ZAs do have a starting handle for such situations. And basically that and a piece of wood and a mallet, and just started hitting it just over and over again. And then eventually you get that, psh, I've done it. Fantastic. Brilliant. I've unstuck the engine. You can turn it now. Right. Great. Brilliant. But obviously, as you will know after I've told you the diesel story, when that went to the specialist and they went, yeah, we're going to need to rebuild that engine anyway because it's just full of sludge. It was not pretty. So I may as well have just left it because they were going to strip it and rebuild it anyway.
But yeah, I guess you do little things at once, don't you? You're also trying to work out the validity of doing the project.
100%. Took it away for an appraisal and I knew it was bad. And they phoned me and said, yeah, it's going to be probably this figure. And they quoted me a figure which I thought, yeah, that is bad. But if I sort of apply for 3 or 4 credit cards, we could maybe do that. But then me being me, I was so desperate to see it done. I didn't do the sort of head over heart thing of going, well, if that's what they've told me, it's going to be that times 2.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be gremlins when they've seen this amount of rust and they've seen this, but obviously when you've cut that out, that might lead to this and it might be that and it might be the other. And that's exactly what happened. Fix one problem and then uncover 10 more problems. And like I said before, I think if it wasn't my dad's ZA and if what happened to my dad hadn't happened and if it wasn't my parents' wedding car, I'd have just said, right, okay, I'm going to sell that to someone who's going to basically strip it for parts because the interior was nice, the glass and the chrome surrounds and things like that, all usable. But as a project, it's just going to cost way more than the car's worth. And I'd have gone and I'd have bought like a top class, amazing, all done, beautiful standard one for a lot less money than it eventually cost to get this one looking tatty but on the road.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my dad's. So
did your siblings have an affinity to that car as well? Or have you kind of been closer to it than them?
They did. I think it's by proxy that I became the car person out of the 4 of us. My sister had a Morris Minor for a bit, and she's since acknowledged that was a grief purchase. She loved it, she enjoyed it, but she wasn't spending enough time with it. My brothers aren't really that interested in cars, to be fair, so it's more me and my sister, but I'm the one who's really into cars. So I don't view it as my car, I view it as the family's car.
Yeah.
It's just I'm the one looking after it, because my mum basically said, out of the 4 of you, being kind, you're the one who was silly enough to try and save it. So I was like, thanks, Mum, because it's been brilliant and I absolutely love it. And it makes me feel amazing that not just that we've saved my dad's car, but we've saved a piece of history, an unspectacular piece of history as well, if we're going to be brutally honest about it.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important to save those things because everybody knows about kings and queens and saves Rolls Royces and nice things. But the unexceptional stuff, okay, I mean, it's not the most unexceptional car in the world, as in, if you had one in the 50s, you were probably doing quite well for yourself. But in the grand scheme of things, it's like if you go to a museum, I'm going to be looking at a tin of beans rather than a crown. Do you know what I mean?
It's nice for your kids, though, isn't it? Once, well, they're old enough, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not going to put any pressure on them. If they're not interested, fine, they're not interested. And also, as well, there's the big question mark over what's going to happen in the future. When I was a kid, the only question was, will this car ever move again? And I think the question now is, when my kids are old enough, should this car be moving in terms of, environmentally? So there might be a whole other discussion on other ways to save it. And that's fine. We'll deal with that as and when the time comes. Or it might be the case that they just both go, do you know what, Dad, I'm not really interested in cars, in which case that's okay too. There's going to be no pressure from me. But if they're into it and they like the history as much as we do as parents, then great, I'll be all for it.
Fantastic. I guess, obviously you've taken your mum out on it. What's her kind of emotions regarding the vehicle?
Yeah, my mum's emotional about it, if we're going to be honest. She said it feels very, very similar to when my dad drove it in terms of the way it sounds and the way it feels. And obviously the interior has been left pretty much alone. And because it was stored inside, that's not changed at all. So I think at first it was really, really emotional for her in a hard way, because even though it was 6 years on, I mean, if you're with someone for 30 odd years and have 4 kids with them, anything without them is going to be difficult. But I think now it's more happy stuff. She just sort of sees the car as as an extension of the family, really, rather than seeing it as some sort of, tribute or putting my dad on like a pedestal, so to speak, which is definitely what it was at first.
Can I, you don't have to kind of go into it. Can I ask the circumstance with kind of how your father passed?
Yeah, of course you can. I'm absolutely fine with that now. It's difficult to talk about, obviously, because even though we're getting on for 11 years, it's your dad we're talking about. I think from what you've alluded to, I think everybody in the room's experienced something similar.
Yeah.
My dad's lifestyle didn't help him.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody's going to mind me saying that. I absolutely adore my dad, and I think people know I adore my dad, but also he was human, and we all have our vices. And he was 58 and basically had heart failure.
Okay.
And he was never really fit enough for surgery. So while we were basically waiting for him to sort of get well enough to have this surgery, sort of time caught up with him. It is really sad that he never met my kids and things like that. But at the same time, if I'm going to be philosophical, it happens to everybody. And okay, I think it was a 26 or 27. It's not really enough time to have with your dad, but I'm glad that it was my dad. So I'd rather have that time than 60 years with somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's, it is really tricky because my dad met my eldest kind of a number of times, but she was less than a year or something when he died. And I'm very philosophical about losing him. He was in a horrific motorbike accident when he was 18. And by all accounts, shouldn't have lived. He was in a coma. He was in hospital for 9 months. Kind of had to learn to walk right again with his other hand. He taught himself right with his left hand, etc. So he died at, I want to say 65, 66. But yeah, he was on borrowed time. My grandma was told he would never walk again. Like he would be kind of basically in a wheelchair, pretty much unresponsive. So yeah, he had kind of a good life. And yeah, my father died of, without kind of bringing the mood down too much, he died of bowel cancer. And his last few months, I wouldn't wish him back in that state.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I always think, because my dad was 65 when he passed, also wasn't in the best of health at that time, obviously. Sounds like a similar sort of lifestyle to probably your dad, Tom, in that didn't really look after himself very well, wasn't fit. But yeah, I kind of see it as one of those, if he had have survived just before he died, like the next, say, survived another 10 to 20 years, would be grim, probably. Like I've got friends whose parents are now sort of mid-70s, suffering with various illnesses like, dementia, all that sort of stuff. One's actually said to me, in a way, I wish that, the lights could have gone out 10 years ago or something rather than prolonged pain for everyone involved. So it's one of those ones, isn't it, really?
You really hit on something there. When I think about mine, I think, would I have liked any more time? Or, of course you would. But I liked him well. And that's the dad I had when I was a kid, not the dad I had when I was an adult, who, is still an absolutely wonderful person. But you want to be able to do all the dad things still with your kids, which he was clearly never going to be able to do. So I'd want him back well. It's a very, very separate situation to what my wife has, where her dad did look after himself and was well, and then he got lung cancer. So again, a lifestyle thing, but he'd quit smoking, 25, 30 years before, and he still got it. And then he had a lung removed and then was told, yeah, you're fine, but it had metastasized to his brain. So he got to go to our wedding, which was great, and obviously we're really grateful for. And we always said, he might not survive long, but he'll meet our kids, and he didn't. But you just got to accept that and just be grateful for what you did have.
Yeah. There is no kind of good way, is there? This is getting kind of dark. In your head, you sort of play a weird game of kind of what would you prefer? Would you rather sort of know that they've got this terminal issue or that kind of long thing, or just wake up in the morning and it's happened and there's no right answer, is there at all?
There's really not, but you're right. You do play those horrible, you do torture yourself with those games.
I was out of the country when my dad hit the snooze button, so I wasn't even in the hospital or around all of the sort of events of the last sort of days, as it were, which obviously is, gut-wrenching in a way because there's no official goodbye. But at the same time, I spoke to my brothers obviously about it, and they're probably, scarred by it in a way, because it is, it's not nice at all. So it's one of those ones, really, isn't it? I mean, when you're not there, you just feel helpless, don't you? But
you feel helpless when you're there as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Really good point. There's no right answer. Do I want to be there? Do I not want to be there? The night it happened to my dad, I was in the corridor of the hospital and I was about to go back in. I was like, do you want to leave him just with mum or not? It was a bit like, what do I do? And then I decided, just let fate decide. You've been out the room for 10 minutes. If you're walking in and it's still there, then that's obviously what's going to happen. And that is what happened. But yeah, there's no right answer.
Yeah, on a more cheerful note, I remember, well, it's kind of cheerful, sitting in the room with my dad after he'd gone, and Mud, Tiger Feet was on the radio. And that just makes me chuckle. And he'd find that hilarious. That just kind of makes me chuckle.
Yeah, I love stuff like that where you think, okay, this is actually really sad, but there is a sort of weird moment of joy in this.
Yeah.
Because there's something that would make them laugh.
It's amazing though, like, it didn't really occur to me until at the beginning of this, when you're sort of saying how long ago it was. But mine was 17 years ago now, which is insane, to be honest. But I think about the world back in 2007. I think it was pre-iPhone.
Well, you could have only been about 20, weren't you? Probably when he passed away.
I was eight. Yeah, about 20. But yeah, no, it's like a world of pre-iPhone and pre-smoking bans, and which we always kind of joke, me and my brother, that's probably why he did check out, because the smoking ban came into force. So what's the point in living?
Everyone's got to have one vice.
Yeah.
Do you recall kind of friends at schools with interesting cars? That's a big nod, yeah.
Yeah, so not that they're interesting cars, not so much that at all, but what the big memory from school would always be that they would come round, and if the garage door was ever open, because my dad was like potting about in the garage or getting the lawnmower out or something like that, they'd always go, why is there a taxi in your garage?
A taxi?
Why is there a taxi in your garage? Every single person would say that, and it's not a taxi. It's not a taxi. And they look a little bit similar. If you don't know anything about cars, as in the same colour, they've got like sort of rounded headlights and a big grille. But yeah, I've not had that since I've been driving it. No one's ever said, "Oh, why are you driving a taxi?" But the kids always, "Oh, it's a taxi."
Did you know what it was? It wasn't just, "Oh, that's Dad's old car." He'd given you a bit of a story to it. You knew the significance, etc.
Yeah, well, my dad's knowledge of cars. If he'd have put him on Mastermind and said, you know, your specialist subject, and it wouldn't even have to be MGs. It would just be like cars from 1910 to 1980. He would just smash it out the park with no passes. He was freakishly robotic in his knowledge about all things cars, right from the engine capacitors to designers to weird quirky facts. Just not the most amazing at working on them, but knew everything else that could possibly know about them. So because of that, I was quite proud of that, and I was like, oh, that's not a taxi, it's 1956 MG Z8, thank you very much. So it was always sort of ingrained in all of us, like, that's what this is.
Do you know why he had that car? Was that just he just needed a runaround, or?
Yeah, it was an accident. So his mate bought it and came and because they were always into cars. My dad's dream car was an MG GT because he saw one on the street when he was like 11. Bought one that was basically a dud. He didn't get on with it. It was like, oh, well, that shattered that dream then. But he was always into cars since. So more MG GTs. He had a TVR at one point, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was great. And his mate bought the ZA because he'd been advised to get one after he described what he'd wanted, basically like a classic saloon runaround. And he said, yeah, get a ZA. He took it home and his wife basically said, I hate that car, get rid of it. So he drove it round to see my dad, and my dad was like, oh, I love your new car, that's amazing. He said, oh, well, I've only brought it to show you the ones because I'm going to have to sell it because my wife hates it. And he went, well, I'll have it then. And that's basically what happened. So because my dad's mate's wife hated the car 40 odd years ago, I ended up with 6 years grief and strife. And
that's a sliding doors moment, isn't it? The mate's wife saying, take it away.
Yeah, if she'd have said, no, it's fine, then I would probably have no mortgage and a Ferrari now.
Is your dad's friend still about? Do you kind of have anything to do with him?
Yeah. I interviewed him for the book.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so he's really pleased that it's back on the road and running and apologetic.
Is his wife still around as well?
Ex-wife.
Ex-wife.
Right. The plot thickens. She must have just lost it with him in the end. He must have brought another one home afterwards that she didn't like. And
yeah, I would have done. Just been like, right, okay, have this instead then.
Yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it? That it wasn't your dad's dream car. It's just massively circumstantial that it was just a case of...
Massively circumstantial. Not a dream car necessarily, no, but it became this huge sentimental object, and now it's got to the point where, like, it is my dad, weirdly. Just, like, daft little things, like the ashtrays in the back of the seats. In one of them, there's still a fag end. That can belong to one of two people. It's either my dad's or my grandma's.
Yeah.
Because they're the only two people who will have smoked in this car. So it's just little things like that I've just gone, I'm leaving that alone.
Nice.
Yeah, it's become like a... Shrine's probably too strong a word because there's definitely my stamp on the car now, but his presence is definitely there.
Well, We spoke to Danny Hopkins, who's the editor of Practical Classics.
Yes.
And he told us about I think it's his grandfather's Rover that he's restored. I think it's a Rover or possibly Triumph. But yeah, restored the whole car, but he's left the headlining. And the headlining's still yellow stained above where the driver was.
Brilliant.
And it's kind of got that sort of smoky sort of waft to it.
Was he a pipe smoker?
Yeah. And everyone gets in it as like, really nice restoration, Danny. What have you done there? And he's like, no, that's my childhood. Like, I can't change that.
Yeah, that's a lovely story.
And yeah, that's kind of just one of many reasons, and kind of talking to you as well is why we do this. It's sort of just uncovering those little stories and all these little things which almost like a blockchain in a way, which kind of goes together and then is the reason why we've kind of got an interest in cars, because all this sort of the last 20, 30, 40 years or whatever it is all these little nuggets have sort of joined together. And then that's why, you've got to buy one of these.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense unless you know the full chain.
Yeah, that's 100%. It's history as much as it is cars, and it's family stories, and it's nice memories, and it's nostalgia, and maybe not necessarily nice memories. It's just memories. It's keeping people close.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Unless you've got anything you're kind of burning and itching to tell us more about.
No, I'm absolutely honoured that you had me on and took an interest in my story. And I love listening to you and just thank you for letting me be part of it.
Thank you very much. No, it's great to get you on, and really nice story. It's cool when obviously your dad's not about, but the car's still about. That's sort of so pivotal to your life in a way. It's sort of been a constant. So best of luck with the book.
Thank you.
Obviously, we'll give it a shout out for you, and hopefully we'll bump into you at some point at kind of a car show or
Waterstones doing a signing or something.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah, fingers crossed.
Excellent,
wonderful. Have a great day, Tom.
All right, thank you very much, Andy.
Take care. Cheers. Bye.
You too.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye.
There we go. That was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
It was quite deep. But it felt like a good guest to kind of have that conversation with. He was quite open with sort of grief and stuff.
Yeah, no, just a great backstory, really, isn't it? It sort of ticks all the boxes when it comes to car nostalgia, I suppose, in terms of what we talk about.
Yeah, very much. I guess for a lot of us and a lot of the guests we have on, it's a reminiscing, but it's also a sort of, I wish I could have that car that was sort of in the past.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe if you look at his father's back catalogue, given the opportunity, he might have gone with the TVR or MGB GT or something like that. But actually, he has got one of the cars from his father's back catalogue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if anyone's in this situation of just inheriting a car and they're umming and ahhing about whether to save it or keep it, or that's probably quite a good one to listen to, isn't it? That might sway you. Because I certainly regret selling my dad's last car.
Yeah, you've said, yeah.
But I mean, circumstances at the time dictate, don't they, really? It's tricky.
Yeah, what would you have done with a massive Mercedes?
Yeah.
Age 20 something and not necessarily got anywhere to put it. But yeah, the value of hindsight, you kind of look back and go, well, that would be lovely to waft around in now.
I could have done weddings in it, couldn't I? Something like that.
And yeah, from kind of my dad's point of view, he had, when he died, Beaufort wedding car, which went to his best friend John,
right?
Which I think that car is still on the road. So at some point it'd be cool to kind of catch up with him and do something with that vehicle.
Yeah,
because that was a kit car. Dad built that from basically a kit. I've got photos of that in his workshop, kind of all just in sort of grey gel coat, if you like, fiberglass. He put all the engine in, did everything, built it all up.
Wow.
And his business was interior, so he upholstered it all in red leather, and the door panels had like a sunburst sort of pattern he'd sewn into it and everything. Really nicely done. He designed his own hood frame, so the hood tucked away a lot neater than the kit version you could buy. He put a lot of effort into that car. And then he had an Auburn, 1935-36 Auburn, I think, 6-cylinder, not V8, which he'd bought with some inheritance actually from my grandfather. And that was kind of a bit of a project. He'd watch one of these like Bangers and Cash type programs. And especially when he was ill, he'd kind of sit and watch that sort of thing, like the auction type programs. And he'd got a little bit of a hit list. When he had some money come in, he was sort of contemplating sort of a Mercedes SL type thing. This kind of Auburn came up, and he bought that, but that got sold. It wasn't on the road, although he had it on the road, but it wasn't on the road when he passed away. But that's just ginormous, like the size of a transit van, pretty much. Those like old American gangster type cars. And the Beaufort's huge as well, so I can't kind of be too upset that I've not got them, because it's
Where
Yeah, in 50 years' time, I might kind of look back and go, "Oh, that'd be nice to waft around in flat cap and all the rest."
Yeah.
But yeah, what am I going to do with that in a 3-bed terrace house?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, in an ideal world, if you could keep these old things and, yeah, like you say, get dressed up, drive them around, take them to events and chat to people about it and stuff, it'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But storage is a big issue for most of us.
It's probably best for everyone that I don't kind of jump into that at this moment in time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know I enjoyed having Tom on.
Yeah, he's really good.
I think he was really cool. And I think that's going to be a really nice kind of episode to put out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, big thanks to him. Yeah, we'll put the description and the details of his book below the podcast episode. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that one as much as we did.
Absolutely.
Anything else from you, John?
No, that was, yeah, like you said, really nice episode. And nice to have although it went a bit dark, it is nice to sort of hear people talk about their memories from, their late father, isn't it? It's probably not something you do that often. So
I think, yeah, obviously we've all kind of been in that situation.
Mm.
And if there's someone out there who's been kind of going through that, then maybe that's just a sort of a light perhaps that says, yeah, it will get easier. And
yeah,
at some point you will be able to talk about this and reflect on it with a positive spin.
I mean, time is certainly a healer, isn't it? Without doubt. I don't really get emotional about talking about it at all anymore. It's such a long time ago. It's almost sort of 2 lifetimes away. It sort of feels to me now, because I kind of had my single life period post passing, and then obviously now it's like a family lifetime.
Yeah.
It's just weird to think back. I mean, like I said, the era that it happened, the world it's a long time ago now, nearly 20 years. So
yeah,
a lot has changed.
Yeah, crazy that.
Yeah.
Imagine if you could, just zap him back to today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do this now, Dad.
Yeah.
You could what?
Well, that car's electric. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, don't go smoking those cigarettes in there.
Yeah.
Go in the pub looking for the cigarette machine.
Yeah. Oh, you can't drive that car there. Oh, no, you have to pay.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, cool. We'll wrap this up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Roll the credits.
Thank you for listening to my dad's car. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please support us. Buy us a coffee and subscribe. And tell all your friends.